Hi, this is Gail Dobie with Design Success University, and I have a great friend, Jeff Elliot, with me today. And Jeff is another fabulous designer here in Denver. And today he brought in some photos from a photo shoot that he did this past weekend, which is an incredible interior. But today I want to talk to you a little bit and talk to Jeff a little bit about how he started in the business and have him talk to you about what his specialty is. I think one of your specialties, which is doing bar and restaurant design. But let's just start off, and why don't you tell me how you got started as a designer?
Well, interestingly enough, I didn't actually have any ambition to be an interior designer up until, I was probably about 22, 23 years old. And then I realized that I just wanted a career that incorporated all my interests, which was basically art and, and furniture design. For the most part, I really wanted to focus on something that could incorporate furniture, history, architecture, and etc. It's not a good answer.
Why not?
Well, that is a good answer, but that's not.
Well, okay, so did you get a design degree?
I did get a design degree. I went to the Interior Design Institute of Denver, which at that time was the only accredited school in the West. It shut down in 1994 after it was reviewed by FIDER and lost its accreditation.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of good people that went to that school, so you're one of those.
Well, that's what I think is interesting is even now, I went right out of that school and started my own practice, which I don't recommend for anyone. But what I learned in that school really kept me going in the beginning. And even now when I have interns that assist under me, I don't think they have as much background from the schools they're going to now as the school that I went to back then, interestingly enough.
So tell me a little bit about why you think that it's not a good idea for people to immediately go out of school and start their design practice.
It's huge. I mean, there's a million reasons, I believe. The main thing, in my opinion, is how to handle a client, how to handle a project, how to handle the people that are working under you, and mainly how to handle the finances of the whole project. How do you bill for it? It's the biggest issue. And if you work under someone, all those issues are handed over to you, and it's easy to control them for the future.
And you can learn on somebody else's
Exactly.
table, so it's a lot easier to do
Exactly.
that.
Because once you make an error on your own dollar, it's a problem.
It's very expensive, thousands
Exactly.
of dollars sometimes. Okay, well, let's talk about how you got started doing more of the commercial design, because I know you've done a lot of bars and restaurants in the Denver area. So how did you get started with that?
Well, with the interest that I have in furniture design and furniture history and etc., it really doesn't relate to commercial design that well. So I think that obviously relates to residential, which is actually my bigger passion. But with the restaurant and the bar design, what happened with that scenario is it's just a matter of networking and connections. My first job was actually a restaurant, and it was a low budget, and the client had a good concept and a good menu and delicious food, and we had a small budget for the interior, and I got it done on that budget, and that's where it all started rolling. So one after another, all these referrals have led into my commercial design background.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then you've also done quite a few of these people's homes after you've done their bars and restaurants too.
Exactly. In the early days, that's where it all came from. The residential side is you do their bar and then you do their house, which interestingly enough, they would spend more money on their house. And one connection after the other, suddenly I was doing more residential than hospitality.
Okay, and I think too in the residential end of the business that has its share of headaches versus doing the commercial or the bars. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you run into when you're doing the bars and the restaurants?
Well, Gail, that's perfect questions there. Residential is interesting because the average residential project will take a minimum of 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
The average commercial project, the problem with the commercial project is once they sign the lease, it's basically when you start designing the project. So every month that you're moving forward on the project is another month that they have to pay for this lease on a space that's not generating revenue. So a normal small-scale commercial project will take 3 months to 9 months, whereas a residential project will take that 9 months. So the problem with that is, with a nightclub or a bar type thing, it's quick turnaround, very low budget. You're dealing with a lot of people that are not necessarily skilled in their profession, whereas residential is completely the opposite. It takes a lot longer. You're dealing with more skilled people. But the problem is with residential, they live with it. Whereas commercial, once it's installed, they're not worried about the quality, they're not worried about the aesthetics, they're not necessarily worried about how it's going to hold up in some of these scenarios. Whereas residential is completely the opposite. They become more passionate and nitpicky about the situation,
Yeah,
which is
definitely.
fine. We all understand. It's our
We do.
environment.
Okay, let's talk about the commercial design just a little bit more, because you talked
Sure.
the passion is not there, and they don't care as much about the quality. So
Mhm.
what are some of the issues that are most important to the bar owners and the restaurant owners when they're making decisions about these projects?
Gail, that is another good question. It basically boils down to one thing. It's the big bang for the dollar. I mean, for when it comes to these type situations, what they want is they want something that's going to have big visual impact upon entering the space that's not going to cost a lot, which
And-
I understand.
And what would that be?
It varies from job to job, and I notice it varies from time frame to time frame. Like when I first started practicing back in the mid 90s to late 90s, it was upholstery made a bigger difference, which was, stylish banquettes or stylish seating or stylish chairs. And then now that we've moved from 2000 and now, the design elements that make big impact are a lot more expensive, interestingly enough, but things like glass and glass walls and reflective surfaces and divider walls. And the seating's not as important as it used to be. Things that are volumetric and reflective seem to be more important.
Well, and lighting, I think, is one of your hallmarks
Absolutely.
as well. And I think the lighting really, and the spaces that I've seen of yours are probably, that's really one of the things that I noticed the most.
Well, Gil, that's so nice. That's another interesting thing, because as we know, lighting is one of the more expensive things in an interior, and usually these jobs can't, they can't support such a cost. So most of the time, a lot of the lighting that we use are kind of big bang decorative effects that we come up with acrylic or fabric or et cetera, that are custom built locally, and they usually suspend around an inexpensive UL listed type fixture, and it's taken care of.
So that's a little bit of your creative edge, is to
Exactly.
bring something in like that, which is a little bit unusual
Mhm.
and probably not as expensive
Right.
as some of the other materials.
Absolutely.
But it creates that visual image.